Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Once again, my name is Joe Nice, and today is December 10, 2020, December the 10th, 2020, December 10, 2020. Today is International Human Rights Day. I want to acknowledge and recognize that. I've done so on my Instagram stories today on my 10,000 step morning walk. Every morning I get after it. It's the 10 Toes Express. It's the 2 Foot Network, 2 Foot Transportation Network, if you will. And you know I get it in. Again, this is another edition and or episode of the Live and Direct Chat series, where these conversations started around the time when I unfortunately had to return to the United States because of the pandemic, and I needed another creative outlet other than music, because my turntables and my mixer and my monitor speakers are still in Vancouver, Canada, at my friend Toby's apartment. And I can't get them because it'll cost an arm and a leg and maybe a kidney or another body part to ship them down here, and I don't have that kind of money right now. Plus, nobody's playing shows anywhere anyway, unless you're doing a live stream. So what I've decided to put my energies into are these daily conversations with people around the world to talk about whatever you all want to talk about. And in some instances, talk about some topics that I feel are important to day-to-day discourse. And now more than ever, I'm seeing that there's more of an importance to having these conversations on a day-to-day basis. Instagram has decided to censor me and shadow ban me from going live until December 18th. This is a 30-day ban. For what, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm continually telling truth. Maybe it's because I'm coming with gems and pearls of wisdom on a day-to-day basis with my videos. But that's okay. The train can't be stopped. The smoothies will always be delivered on time. And what I'm trying to do more and more each day with these conversations and the now semi-world famous Joe and Kat chat series. And we're going to be filming another episode of that sometime later this week. Kat has had a really busy week with a lot of stuff going on, so she hasn't had time to do everything she needs to do on her end with getting the show up and moving. And plus, I've got some stuff cooking too. So it's a team effort. We're a team. We're Joe and Kat chats, but this is the Live and Direct Chat series. What we want to do here is to continually raise the horizon of aspiration and deepen the well of inspiration. I'm going to make sure I say that again, because that's really what this mission and vision statement for this show is going to be about for the foreseeable future. And the foreseeable future meaning for a long, long, long time. And just like my guy Prince said, forever is a long time. Forever is a mighty long time. We're looking to raise the horizon of aspiration and deepen the well of inspiration. So that's what we're going to do with these conversations. And today's not going to be me screaming at the internet, screaming at Nancy Pelosi, screaming about Joe Biden and how terrible he is, screaming about the woke and fake identity politics of Kamala Harris, screaming about Donald Trump, screaming about Mike Pence, screaming about Mitch McConnell. I'm not going to do that today, because I'm going to come with a little more factual information today. I'm going to put on the professor hat. We're going to talk about something. And I mentioned this over the past several days in many of my videos. I've mentioned how America needs a yellow vest movement. I mentioned how America needs a workers' strike. And I also mentioned that we had demands. My demand sign is over here on my left. I don't want to pull it out because I have to reach, and I don't want to reach. But one of the demands that I continually spoke about is Medicare for all. I posted a speech that I did at the People's Power Assembly earlier this year. It's actually June 20th of this year. I reposted that speech again today. You can watch that. And in that speech, one of the demands that I had was Medicare for all. Now, most recently, it was an outlet called the American Prospect. They mentioned how America could have Medicare for all. Everybody could have Medicare for all under Section 1881 Alpha of the Social Security Act. I'm going to say that again. Section 1881 Alpha of the Social Security Act. Now, this has only been used one time in the federal government, and this happened about 11 years ago. It happened in a small town. It happened actually in a county called Lincoln County, and Lincoln County is a county. It's the furthest most northwestern county in Montana, and in Montana there was the W.R. Grace Company had a vermiculite mine, and the entire community was poisoned with asbestos. Thousands of people were affected with asbestos and mesothelioma. And the federal government said, hey, we need to do something for these people because they're sick, they're dying, and their rates of asbestosis and mesothelioma are considerably higher than all other places around the United States. So what the federal government did is they said, hey, you know what? We're going to establish a new pilot program. We're going to establish a pilot program. And under this pilot program, we're going to go ahead and change, and I wrote this down just to make sure I get it right. We're going to change Section 10323 of the Affordable Care Act, of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And what they did is under this pilot program, they changed under that Section 10323, which provides coverage for environmental hazards. What they said was, okay, you know what? We're going to go ahead and change the Social Security law. We're going to change the Social Security Act of 1881A to include Medicare coverage for individuals exposed to environmental health hazards. Medicare for all to those affected by environmental health hazards. So that's what happened back in 2009. That's what happened back in 2009. So a couple of facts about Libby, Montana. Libby, Montana is the largest town in Lincoln County, Montana. It's the county seat. It's approximately 2,800 people that live there. The average income is about $53,000. The poverty rate is about 17.5%. The median house value is $106,000. Something else to note. 98% of the population is white. The other remaining 2% are classified as other races. Other races meaning people who are two or more races. Native Americans, indigenous people, Asian populations, Pacific Islanders, and Hawaiian people. That's all lumped into the quote unquote other races category. There are exactly 0 people living in Libby, Montana. 0. Lincoln County, Montana facts. Let's go over those. Population is about 20,300 people. The average household income is about $54,700. The average individual income is basically half of that, $27,200. 95% of the people in Lincoln County, Montana are white. 3% are classified as other races meaning 2 or more races in one human body, Hawaiian or Native Islander, indigenous or Asian. Black people in the entire county of Lincoln County, Montana, which has 20,366 people. They're exactly 0.61 of the population, or 12 people. There are 12 people in the entire county of Lincoln County. There are 3 cities. 3 cities are Libby, Eureka, Montana. Eureka, Montana has about 1,000 people. And Troy, Montana has about 1,100 people. And the demographics of those 3 cities are quite similar. The demographics of Eureka and Troy are quite similar to the demographics of Libby, Montana. Now, as I said earlier in this conversation about 6.5 to 7 minutes ago, Libby, Montana is located in northwestern Montana, and it borders Idaho and the Kootenai region in British Columbia. And if you've ever been to the Kootenays in British Columbia, you know many of the towns there, like Nelson. Who doesn't love Nelson? I love Nelson. If I had a one-way ticket to go anywhere in the world right now, Nelson would be high on the list. Castlegar is about 30 minutes away from Nelson. You know that town? That's where the airport is. And the airport's in the middle of a strip mall. It's a tiny airport. A lot of flights get canceled in and out of there. Castlegar is affectionately known as Cancelgar because the amount of canceled flights in the area. The Slocan Valley, Fernie, and a town that everybody knows because of Shambhala Music Festival, Salmo, British Columbia. All of that is part of the Kootenai. So Lincoln County borders that area. Now, we're going to talk about the Social Security Act 1881 Alpha because, again, it's important that we discuss this as a pathway to making sure that every American gets Medicare for all, not just people in Libby, Montana, or Troy, Montana, or Eureka, Montana, or all the other towns and unincorporated communities in Lincoln County, Montana, but make sure that everybody gets it. I want y'all to pay attention. Now, Section 1881 Alpha of the Social Security Act is part of the Social Security Act that authorized Medicare coverage for individuals exposed to environmental health hazards. So if you had an environmental health hazard, you're getting covered. Now, some of you who are not from the United States, or some of you who are from the United States and don't understand what Medicare actually is, I'm going to explain that to you. Medicare is a federal insurance program that's afforded to people 65 years or older, younger people with certain disabilities, and I won't go over all the disabilities, and people with end-stage renal failure, basically permanent kidney failure. So if your kidneys are bad, you're getting Medicare, and you're getting covered for the rest of your life. Now, Medicare is paid for by payroll taxes. Now, there are 4 parts of Medicare. You have Medicare Part A, which is inpatient hospital coverage. You have Medicare Part B, which is outpatient or medical coverage. You have Medicare Part C, which is the Medicare Advantage, which is another outlet to pay for private insurance. If you want a little more coverage, you can get it that way. And Medicare Part D, which is prescription drug coverage. So again, Medicare has 4 parts. Part A is inpatient hospital coverage. Part B is outpatient medical coverage. Part C is essentially supplemental insurance. Part D is prescription drug coverage. 4 parts to Medicare. Now, what happened with the Social Security Act of Social Security Act 1881A, Section 1881A? What it did is it covered individuals affected by environmental exposures. And you're probably like, well, Joe, come on, man, what's an environmental exposure? And I'll be happy to explain that to you. An environmental exposure is a chemical or compound that an individual comes in contact with on a day-to-day basis. So, secondhand smoke, vehicle exhaust, certain types of pesticides, BPA plastics, and I think it's bisphenol is BPA. I think that's what a BPA plastics are called. Parabens, you usually see parabens in skincare products and lotions. Lead contamination like in water or paint. Food additive, asbestos is certainly an environmental exposure. And other airborne viruses are certainly environmental exposures. Now, again, what this Section 1881A did, it established the pilot program under the Affordable Care Act, which I talked about a few minutes ago. And then there are certain parts of that act. I want to make sure I go over these certain parts of the act with you. That way you all have a clearer understanding of what actually happened with this law. Now, it said here it offers discretionary deeming. Now, discretionary deeming is, okay, look, who gets this coverage? And it says a person diagnosed with a medical condition caused by exposure of the individual to a public health hazard to which an emergency declaration applies. Okay, now, Part B of that same discretionary deeming section said, other parts of discretionary deeming include people not included or affected by mesothelioma or an asbestos-related condition in the geographic area. The geographic area, when Section 1881A of the Social Security Act was amended, was Lincoln County, Montana, with those 3 towns, Eureka, Troy, Libby. So that's the environmental area. Now, the previous paragraph, I said an emergency declaration must apply. So there has to be some sort of emergency. You just can't say, okay, well, hey, you know what? Yeah, we're going to give these people health care because they deserve it, but there's no real emergency there. But there has to be an actual emergency in order for this to work. So the emergency declaration is defined by the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act of 1980 under the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, what is that? What is that defined? And it's defined that sort of public health emergency that we just mentioned a couple of seconds ago, that emergency declaration. That emergency declaration is any hazardous substance that is released or a substantial threat of a release into the environment, or a release or substantial threat that is a danger to public health or welfare. So basically, if you have something that's floating around or something that could harm the public's health or general welfare, or there's a threat of harming the public's health or welfare, that qualifies as an emergency declaration. It's an emergency. Hey, health emergency. All right, EPA has to investigate it. They'll make the declaration. So there's another stage and another section of this entire act called effective dates of coverage. And the effective dates of coverage describe what people get. Now, it talks about the described benefits and the described benefits for eligible individuals. Now, we talked about the eligible individuals. The eligible individuals are basically people who live in Lincoln County, Montana. Now, you had to be there for, I think, had to be living there, I think, 10 years before or 6 months before or something like that. But there's there's not a whole lot of requirements. Basically, if you live in Lincoln County and you were affected with mesothelioma, asbestos, or some other illness related to the vermiculite mine contaminating and basically and sometimes killing some of these people in Lincoln County, Montana, you're covered. Now, what does it give people? It gives people automatically Medicare Part A, and Medicare Part A is that inpatient hospital coverage. Medicare Part B is that outpatient medical coverage. Now, this effective date of coverage was June 17th, 2009. So about 11 and a half years ago. And it was declared at the time by the EPA administrator, Lisa Jackson. And Lisa Jackson said, hey, you know what? Yep, there's a problem here. We need to do something about this. And the Secretary of Health and Human Services at the time, who I think was Kathleen Sebelius, and she was appointed under the under Obama. She basically said, yep, hey, you know what? I'm chair of the HHS. Social Security, I think, was under HHS, Health and Human Services at the time. So they said, yeah, you know what? Let's, under this CERCLA, the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, let's give everybody Medicare. Let's cover everybody at least under Part A and Part B. Now, you also get the opportunity to enroll in Medicare Part D, which is prescription coverage. And if your income is low enough, if you don't meet the income requirements, you get what's called extra help. And extra help is a benefit under Medicare. And extra help basically says, hey, look, you know, if you don't make enough money, we, the federal government, under the Medicare plan, can help pay for monthly premiums, your yearly deductible, co-insurance, and co-payments. So again, if you don't make enough money, the federal government will even help you pay for some of your stuff, in addition to giving you Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B, which is inpatient hospital coverage and outpatient medical coverage. Free of charge, no questions asked. There's no age limit, no waiting period. You don't even have to have worked in the past to get this coverage. And you don't have to pay it to Social Security or Medicare to get any of this coverage. So this is what happened in Lincoln County, Montana, about 11 years ago. 11 years ago. And a whole bunch of people there got health care. They got health care. Now, you're probably like, well, Joe, that's a whole lot of reading. That's a whole lot of facts. But how does this apply to everybody else getting Medicare? Let me talk about that, because I mentioned the definition of an environmental emergency, or an emergency declaration more specifically. And I said it's any hazardous substance that is released, or there is a substantial threat of a release into the environment, or a release of substantial threat that is a danger to public health or welfare. Hey, it's in the air. It's out there. It can harm you. It can kill you. It's a damage to public. It threatens public health. It threatens public safety. It threatens public welfare. That's an emergency declaration. Now, again, this comes under the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act of 1980 under the Environmental Protection Agency. So again, and this talks about environmental exposures. We discussed what environmental exposures are. Certain examples are secondhand smoke, asbestos, exhaust from a vehicle, certain pesticides, certain food additives, and airborne viruses. Airborne viruses are certainly examples of an environmental exposure. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, what exactly is COVID-19? What is the coronavirus? That seems like an environmental exposure, because that's an airborne virus. So everybody's walking around with masks right now. That's why jurisdictions all around the world are locking down. I talked about lead as being one of the environmental exposures. Lead paint, lead contamination in water, lead contamination in paint. The fine folks of Flint, Michigan didn't get this benefit. And they could have easily had somebody from the Environmental Protection Agency come in and say, yeah, this is an environmental exposure. We need an emergency declaration because you know what? There's a whole lot of people that have been adversely affected by lead contamination. And we, the government, need to take care of these people. Because what happened here isn't right. Detroit, Michigan, same thing. Baltimore, Maryland, my hometown. Lead paint is a huge problem in that city. So is lead in the water. Washington, D.C., same thing. So a bunch of cities around the United States didn't get this coverage. But Lincoln County, a county that is basically almost entirely white people, and essentially 12 black people, said, yeah, you know what? Yep, we're going to take care of these folks because asbestos is an environmental exposure and it falls under an emergency declaration. And we're going to take care of them. But a bunch of people in Flint, Michigan didn't get that coverage. They weren't afforded that luxury. They weren't afforded that benefit. Obama and the governor at the time, I forget the governor's name, basically came up with another plan, and it had a finite time limit. He said, hey, you know what? You're covered from here to here. Anything outside of that, we're not giving you any more coverage. And that coverage is expired now. But what I want to focus on again is we have an airborne virus floating in the air now. That's why we're wearing masks. That's why we're told to physically distance. That's why we're told to wash our hands. That's why we're told we can't fly anywhere. We can't travel anywhere. That's why school is virtual now. That's why office buildings have closed down. Why I'm in North Carolina, the state of North Carolina is under a curfew, at least where I'm in the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area. Can't be on the streets after 10 o'clock. Everything's closed down from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. except gas stations. Closed down. So again, if Libby, Montana can get this coverage under Section 1881A of the Social Security Act, and this can be written into law via the Affordable Care Act, which is the governing healthcare law of the United States, and it can provide medical coverage for environmental exposures via an emergency declaration, because that's essentially what this is. And then you go through and define the parameters of what environmental exposures are specifically covered. And then you go ahead and define the population that is eligible to be covered. I need somebody who maybe has a law degree, or somebody who has a public health degree, or somebody a little bit smarter than me, or maybe a lot smarter than me, to explain, or somebody in government to explain to me why the entire United States does not have coverage under Section 1881 of the Social Security Act. I need someone to explain that to me, please. I need someone to explain to me why nobody has gone ahead and said, hey, you know what, this coronavirus, yeah, this is environmental exposure, and this is an emergency. We had over 3,000 people die yesterday being December 9th. Over 3,000 people died. Coming up on 300,000 dead since the pandemic began. If that's not if that doesn't qualify as an emergency declaration, I don't know what does. I don't know what does. And again, you're talking about environmental exposures. Airborne viruses qualifies as an environmental exposure. And right now, we are in a public health emergency. And again, an emergency declaration is the threat of a hazardous substance or danger or the release of a hazardous substance that can adversely affect public health and general welfare. Look at how the coronavirus has affected people's personal health. Not only their physical health, but their mental health. People are becoming depressed. People have committed suicide as a result of this. Not only the people who died from COVID, but the people who get COVID and recover. There's permanent damage to their hearts, scarring on their lungs, etc. We've read about all this. So again, the people of Lincoln County, Montana got hospital coverage and medical coverage under Medicare. They had an opportunity to enroll in Medicare Part D to get prescription coverage. And if your income is low, they'll give you extra help. They'll essentially say, hey, we'll cover some of the bills for your co-insurance, your co-pays, your deductibles. And if your prescriptions are too expensive, we'll help you pay for them too. If the federal government can pay for people in Lincoln County, Montana, the federal government should be paying for people in Flint, Michigan. The federal government should be paying for people in Detroit, Michigan. The federal government should be paying for people in Baltimore, Maryland. The federal government should be paying for people in Washington, D.C., and Prince George's County, and Montgomery County, and Prince William County, and Fairfax County. The federal government should be paying for kids that get damaged by lead in Memphis, Tennessee, and Athens, Georgia. Our Latino brothers and sisters, Latino and Latina brothers and sisters who live in a farming community and have been adversely affected by pesticides being sprayed nearby their homes. They deserve to get health care too. That's pesticide. Pesticide is an environmental exposure. They deserve coverage. And again, right now, we are all being exposed to COVID-19. If we all weren't being exposed to COVID-19, you wouldn't have to lock down everything. We're all being exposed to it, and we're all being affected by it. And an airborne virus is an environmental exposure. And this is a public health emergency that is a substantial threat to the public health and the general welfare of society. So again, what I think we need to do is try to put more pressure on our politicians for Medicare for all. And maybe this is done legislatively, fine. But maybe this is another alternative. Maybe this is another pathway or avenue to make sure that everybody gets health care in the United States. And not just during this pandemic. Because the fine folks of Lincoln County, Montana get Medicare Part A and Part B. They get Medicare for the rest of their lives. No questions asked. No age limit. No paying into the system. No waiting. No being 65 years age of older. None of that. If you live there, you get it. As long as you get affected by one of those illnesses that they specify in Section 1881A of the Social Security Act. We're all being affected by COVID-19 in one form or fashion, one way or another. And not just the people who are sitting in hospital beds and intensive care units fighting for their lives. There's a whole lot of other people that in 21 days are going to lose the rest of their unemployment benefits. And in many instances, many people who have been rendered unemployed or, to borrow a phrase from my British friends and British family, made redundant, have lost their health insurance because in the United States, your health insurance is tied to your employment. One of the requirements under the effective date of coverage section, and you can go on the internet, there's a website that describes some of this stuff in a bit more detail, ssa.gov/Libby, Libby. You can read a little bit more. It's one page. It's not much, not a whole lot of information there, but it's enough to cover you with what you need to know. And again, they covered everybody for life. The requirements are, hey, if you live here, you get it. If you don't make enough money, we can help you pay for it. And we'll give you medical coverage and hospital care. And you can enroll in Medicare Part D prescriptions. If they can get it because of asbestosis and mesothelioma, I think everybody suffering from COVID-19 and COVID-related illnesses should be getting medical care. And medical care under this act, Section 1881A of the Social Security Act. Additionally, not just those who have been suffering from COVID-19 or the coronavirus, but every person in the United States should be getting this coverage because we are all affected by this in one way or another. The federal government just found $740 billion to fund the Department of Defense, the Pentagon. The federal government found $5 trillion back in March via the CARES Act to give to the largest banks and richest 1,000 people in these United States. The federal government can definitely find the money to pay for our health care. And it's through Medicare. So it comes out of our taxes anyway. I hope this video was helpful. I hope this video was informative. And I hope this video sheds a little bit of light into a bit more of the tangibles behind the demands and what some of those demands actually look like. Because, yeah, we could say, hey, you know what? Yeah, Medicare for all. Universal basic income. Student loan forgiveness. I might even do an episode about that. Another one of these live and direct chats about student loans and student loan forgiveness one of these days. But ultimately, we want to make sure that not only when we come with the conversations that we need to come with, we come with facts, come with factual information, and we come up with a basis for our line of reasoning, or at least in my instance, my line of reasoning, because I'm the only one talking right now. Again, we deserve Medicare for all. We deserve health care for every American, every single American, and not just 20,000 people in Lincoln County, Montana, that suffered from asbestos and mesothelioma. Everybody deserves health care. It's not just people suffering from COVID-19. And it's not just those who have suffered health problems from any other environmental hazard or environmental exposure, to use the terminology as specified in the Act. I've said all about as much as I want to say for today. I want to thank each and every one of you that's watched, and each and every one of you that will watch. Share this video with your friends, share it with your people. If you like what I'm doing, tell a friend. If you don't like what I'm doing, tell me. I'm a communicative brother at all times. I'm going to keep doing more of these videos because I think there's value to all of them. And I want to make sure that people have an understanding of the demands that must be met. And not only must be met, but the demands that we need to be making to our government. This is another one of those demands. This is the potential pathway to one of those, to meeting one of those demands. The demand is making sure that every single American in these United States of America has health care. Because today, on International Human Rights Day, health care is defined in I think it was Article 23 or Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was enforced and enacted and ratified on this date in 1948. That everybody's supposed to have health care. Health care is a human right. But right now in these United States, there's a whole bunch of people that don't have health care. And that's a violation of our human rights. We should have health care. All of us. Thank you, everybody. And again, as I said yesterday, and I'm going to say it again today, I'm going to keep saying this because I want to make sure I reinforce this message. I come in peace and I come in love. But sometimes love comes in the form of difficult and uncomfortable conversations. Peace.